It is time for stamp class. And as I posted yesterday, it's time to pivot once again. We're getting really, really good at this, aren't we? So we have begun our in-person stamp class again, which means we can't really be in two places at one time, can we, Dee?
Not likely.
Not likely. So we have decided that on Stamp Class Day, which is always the third Saturday of each month, we will post a pre-recorded video for those of you that do not live near us. And then those that are local and are able to come to class, they will actually be able to come and put their projects together. So that means we're also going to be offering the kit to make the projects to go. So you will be able to get the supplies to create the projects that we will be demonstrating today. So in order to receive your kit, it's super easy. All you have to do is place a minimum order, or it's $20 for the class. So let me know if you are interested in getting the supplies to create the projects. I do have 2 kits available. We cut just a couple extras. Stamp class, as I said, is always the third Saturday of the month, and 10 days prior to that is the deadline to sign up. So in the future, if you would like to attend in person or you would like a kit to go, just let me know by that deadline. So this month, we are using an absolutely beautiful suite. It's called Expressions in Ink. And we're going to start first by showing you the paper. It is a specialty paper. So what that means is there is some foiling on this paper. So that makes it just a little bit more expensive than our usual designer series paper. But I think with the specialty paper, it's always well worth just a couple extra dollars because it's absolutely stunning. So you have Evening Evergreen, Magenta Madness, Polished Pink. Gosh, what other colors, Steve? Do you remember? Oh, Pale Papaya. Yes. I think even Shaded Spruce.
Yes.
Lots of colors. Going to look at the list for us.
We
said Magenta Madness, Polished Pink, Pale Papaya, Evening Evergreen, Just Jade, and Shaded Spruce. So you're going to find lots of colors that you can coordinate with this designer series paper. And then we are also using the gorgeous stamp set that has a couple of different floral images, leaves, some beautiful sentiments with amazing fonts. And that does come in a bundle with the, I think they're called the artistic dies. So these are just amazing. This intricate die we'll be using on one of the projects, this leaf die on the very first project. And then I think we're using most of the stamps and most of the dies in our class. We are also using one of the embossing folders. Now, this is not part of this suite collection, but this bark embossing folder is really awesome. So we're incorporating that. And then in the suite collection, there is also an ephemera pack. So let me show you if I can get these out. They're pretty delicate. You do have some kind of iridescent sequins. And then pull that tissue out. That just kind of protects it. You've got several sheets of these just stunning gold pieces of ephemera. We've used quite a bit from this pack. And that may not pick up great on camera because it is so shiny, but we will be incorporating that as well. Now, I do have a couple of samples that I would like to show you. These are not projects we're making today, but this is a swap that I received. It's gorgeous. It really features the stamping, that gorgeous flower, and then using some gold foil sheet to help give it just a little bit more shine. And then also a card that I made as part of a challenge, and I really featured the designer series paper. It's gorgeous. And then also use that gilded leafing that we love so much. We love it, don't we, Dee?
You can always add some shiny.
Yeah, the gilded leafing is great with this paper because, yes, we love shiny. So there's a couple more samples for you. And then we'll go ahead and move into our first project. So this one does feature that leaf die cut. It's a very straightforward card, but it really is beautiful. So let's go ahead and start with our Evening Evergreen card base. I'm loving the new in colors. They're just so pretty. Let me grab a bone folder. I think I've got one right back here. You know, I love to burnish that score line. It just really helps your cards lay down. Evening Evergreen. Love it. It's such a pretty new in color. And I've used it quite a lot. When we first got the new in colors, I thought that would be a great color at Christmas time, but I have really used it a bunch. It is featured in several of the new Designer Series papers in the annual catalog. And you're going to see it making quite an appearance in the mini catalog. We'll soon be getting the new mini holiday catalogs out. That's usually one of your jobs, right, Dee?
Oh.
Now here, I'm not sure how well that will show up on camera, but we do have that bark embossing folder that we've used on this just piece of basic white cardstock. So let's go ahead, trying to figure out which is the best side to adhere down. Now, of course, when you are using a paper that has been embossed like this, you want to be very generous with your adhesive because you just don't have as much surface area to adhere to your card base. So just make sure you're generous with your adhesive. And we will let that dry for just a moment. So you can see that's already coming together really well. Let me bring in just a little piece of grid paper. This is actually the grid paper to use with the Stamparatus. I love having that on my desk. It's just a great little tool to have without having my entire desk taken up with a piece of grid paper. So we're just going to use this little strip of pale papaya, and we're going to attach it. I think I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm just going to put a very thin bead of liquid glue on this strip of Designer Series paper, and then I'm going to lay it down. And I'll show you why I want to lay it on this grid paper. This is going to help me kind of line up my piece of pale papaya. And I think when I cut these kits that I did cut the Designer Series paper a little bit too long. I did. So let me scooch that down. And actually, I'm going to set that aside for just a second so that it can dry before I trim it. They'll just spent about an hour removing adhesive from a bunch of our snips. So we make a mess sometimes, don't we? You love us, Dee, don't you? It is worth it. All right, so we're just going to bring in the Best Wishes stamp, and it's a beautiful font, in our Memento Tuxedo black ink, and stamp our sentiment right quick. You want to go ahead and trim that off, Dee? Do you mind if it's dry? It'll save us a little bit of time. Well, I did not do a great job stamping. I'm going to have to flip that one over and get my stamp ink inked up better. And I think it'll still be okay. Yeah. You definitely want to, I still did not do a great job stamping. Let me grab another little die cut. Okay, grabbed another little die cut. Let's try this. Third time is always the charm. We get it inked up really good. We get it lined up better. Little bitty die cut. Much better. What you think, Dee?
Beautiful.
Okay, let me move that out of the way and we'll let that dry for just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my little leaf here. So I went ahead and added it. And I just used a little bit of liquid glue on some of the places. It has a little bit more cardstock towards the stem, kind of the veining of the leaves. You could certainly use a sponge dauber in your silicone craft sheets if you wanted to just kind of daub on a little bit of glue. It doesn't, you know, this liquid glue is very strong, so you don't need a lot. Just a little bit on each leaf. Also, if you like the fine tip liquid glue, more of a precision tip, you could do that as well. Now that I've gotten glue all over my fingers, we're just going to kind of place that over on the side, and I did give it a little bit of a curve as I added it to that embossed layer. And we will give that just a second to dry, making sure it's making good contact with that embossed layer as well. So now I'll go ahead and bring in that strip. And as I said in the kit, I did cut this a little bit too long. The designer series paper, I think I cut it at 5.5. Not a big deal. Once you get your Pale Papaya cardstock strip attached, just snip that off with your paper snips. And then this is going to come right across here. Again, just kind of an adhesive of choice to add that. I love using my liquid glue. We're almost done. So we do have a little medallion that we're going to mount our sentiment on. So let me show you which dies we used. Gosh, it's Tasteful Labels, and what's the name of those other ones, Steve? Do you remember? Ornate Frames. That's one of his favorites. So Tasteful Labels, these were from the annual catalog last year. We've used them a ton, as well as the Ornate Frames. So that is where we pulled to get those sentiment piece, and then also this mat out of gold. Let me grab some Stampin' Dimensionals. Just had some out. There we go. And we'll just put a couple here. Attach that to this little medallion. This makes it really stand out. And then we'll go ahead and attach that medallion, and we will finish up project number 1. And of course, each card is unique since we're making it ourselves. There might be a slight difference in placement, but overall, pretty close. I love this card. All right, we will move some things. Give us just a moment. We'll take a little break. We will move some things out of the way and be back with card number 2. Okay, before we begin project number 2, let's talk about the colors that we're using today. We've already used Memento Tuxedo Black on project number 1. We're also using Pear Pizzazz, Polished Pink, and Pale Papaya. Get those out of the way. And I'll bring in our second project. So this super cute little card, we are creating our own background just with stamping. Did use just a small piece of designer series paper and also that bark embossing folder to give it a little bit of visual interest. So let's go ahead and start with that. I did adhere that piece of Pear Pizzazz that had been embossed to our basic white cardstock base. We will go ahead and bring in our grid paper, and let me find my floral image and our Pale Papaya ink pad. Now somewhere I had a piece of cardstock, yes, that I had stamped on, and you'll notice here that this pale papaya is very pale, and this is what I want it to look like. So I realized that my ink pad really did need to be re-inked. I thought we would show you that right quick. So when you purchase an ink pad, I always recommend purchasing the re-inker as well. Haven't even had this ink pad terribly long, but it does need to be re-inked because I've used it a good bit. So you're just going to apply some ink as you gently squeeze the bottle, and I usually do it both ways. And then Dale was kind enough to go get us a plastic spoon, just a disposable spoon. You can keep one of those in your craft room. And you're just going to use the back of that spoon to really press that ink into the ink pad. So now we're going to be ready to go. And then you can just use your chamois to clean that spoon off, and you can use it whenever you're re-inking any color ink pad. So let's stamp our flower. And I do want to kind of randomly do this. And I will kind of go with that rule of odd numbers. And Dale will tell you when you think you need to add another one, edit yourself, stop. I have a little issue with that. Let me grab my little leaf image and some Pear Pizzazz ink. And here we can come in and kind of fill in some of the little spaces with our leaf image. And you can go off the paper, have just a little peek of your leaf. That looks really cute, doesn't it? And then we'll bring in our Memento Tuxedo Black in our Hello sentiment. Ink that up. So we did take the time to re-ink this black ink pad as well. Just holding that for a few seconds to make sure it transfers well. I'm a little bit crooked though, but that's okay. I think we're ready to make our card. So now we're going to use a piece of Evening Evergreen cardstock, and we're going to mat this background that we created. Oh goodness, that could have been disastrous. Some days I'm just clumsy, and some days I'm just clumsier than other days. Make sure and get this even border. How's that look, Dee? I'm going to go ahead and add this strip of Designer Series paper. It is really pretty. And we're just going to come across the bottom. This is just a 1-inch strip. And this one I cut too short. But we're going to make it work. We're just going to have a border all the way around. So if your strip of Designer Series paper is a little bit too short, I do apologize. I think it's still going to work just fine. We are going to bring in some Stampin' Dimensionals to add to the back of this layer. Let's go ahead and pull those backings off. We found that Oliver loves the backings of Stampin' Dimensionals. He can find them every time. And I'm adding this at an angle to our card front. But if you like it straight, you could certainly do that as well. Okay, so we have card number 2 complete. And each one is going to look a little bit different because of how we stamp, but it's really fun to make your own background. Okay, next up, we're really going to be featuring those larger floral images with a little bit of a fun fold here. So let's start with our card base, which is Pear Pizzazz. Find a bone folder. Oh, that's a spoon, not a bone folder. And we'll go ahead and burnish that score line. Now, we have cut from the front of this 1 inch. So that's going to make our fun fold. Okay, let me get out the piece of basic white that's going on the inside, along with our piece of Designer Series paper. Again, this paper is just gorgeous. Adhere this. And this piece, I want to say it's 3 inches by 5.5. And we're going to put it in first to assure that our Designer Series paper is able to cover over. We don't have any white peeking through to the front. Bring that pretty close to your fold. And so as you can see, when I close it, it does show a bit. So we're going to work on that. Everything lined up. Now, as I add my Designer Series paper, I'm going to move over just a tiny bit from the edge so that when the card is closed, I don't have that white peeking through. Other thing you could do is maybe cut an 1.25 inch piece of Designer Series paper. That would work as well. Just leaving a little bit of a border. Looks great. Okay, we are going to set that aside and let that dry. Oops, looks like I need to work on that crease again because of putting that inside panel. Okay. Now, in your kit, you are going to be receiving, if you're doing the to-go, you're going to be receiving these blank images that Dale die cut for you. We are not allowed to send you pre-stamped images, and that's a policy of Stampin' Up. But this image is pretty easy to line up. Let's go ahead and do our stamping right quick. And I think what I'll do is start with a sentiment. And I'm going to be doing that sentiment in polished pink, our happy birthday. I'm going to move it around the pad a good bit, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Let's go ahead and stamp that. Okay. And then let me move that sentiment piece out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and bring in our floral image in my Pale Papaya ink pad. And again, we're going to use our spoon. Now, the way that Stampin' Up! Ink pads, I'll close that back again. If you think about it, that ink pad is upside down as it is stored. And we want that so that it brings the ink to the surface of the ink pad. But these stamps work much better and give you a better image if you take your bone folder or a spoon and you kind of push some of that ink to the edge of the pad so that you're not getting quite as much ink when you ink the floral image. That really lets that distinction in the stamp that's built into it really shine. So let's stamp that flower. Oh, it's so pretty. Get that Pale Papaya out of the way. And let me bring in my little chamois. I have this chamois that's been cut into quarters, and that's what I really prefer to use. I want to get all the Pale Papaya off. And Now we're going to bring our spoon back in. We're going to do the same thing with the polished pink ink. So because I have been moving that ink around a little bit on this ink pad, that's why I wanted to stamp the sentiment first, because I'm actually pushing that ink to the corner. Okay. And we'll ink that flower up again and stamp it over towards this other side. So again, really, really pretty. It really lets that image show. And then we've got to stamp a couple of leaves. Again, bringing in Pear Pizzazz. Just a couple of leaves to cut out. Okay. And now let me go die cut. I'll be right back. So now we have our die cut flowers and leaves. I did notice that I forgot to stamp my center of my flowers before they were die cut. So that's not a problem. We can just go in and add that center to each of them. You don't have to do that step, but I really like it. And I also wanted to bring in one of the flower images and just show you the difference. This one, I did not move the ink on the ink pad, and then this one we did. So it really gives a very different look. Okay, on with our card here. Let's bring our base back in. Now this card I made before I decided to make it part of this class. So if I bring it close, you'll see we use the dots embossing folder here. And we also use the gold foil sheet to cut this little label or layer for the background. I went ahead and stayed with the bark embossing folder for this card for our class. So we will add that piece next. And that again, you know, not a lot of that shows, but it really does give it some more visual interest. And I just love the way embossing folders add that extra touch. And I did cut this foil sheet from copper, which I think looks really pretty as well. So we're only adding some liquid glue to that one side. And that's going to be plenty because our liquid glue is strong. And we will just kind of center this up on our card. Okay, give that just a second to dry. So because we only put adhesive on that one half, we're good. I think I'll go ahead and add my sentiment next down to the bottom of this little label. And does this one, I think this one comes from Stitch So Sweetly, doesn't it, Dean? Do you remember?
No, I thought that was the rectangle.
The
Stitch with it. Oh, no, that's contour. I'm sorry.
scallop contour dies.
Yes.
Dale does a lot of our die cutting. So as you get your pieces out of your packet, they'll probably worked on it for you. So then we're going to come up here with this flower. And we'll have room for this flower down here, kind of get our placement figured out. We love preparing classes. Don't we, Dean?
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And again, each card is going to look a little bit different, and that's okay. I'm going to bring in Stampin' Dimensionals to give this one a little bit of lift.
Because we always pop it up, right?
When in doubt, you do. All right, let's see how this one will fit on here. I might bring it over. I don't know. That looks pretty good. And then we also have our little leaves. And just, it's important on this that you make sure you stay within your card base as you tuck your pieces in. I think I will actually grab some glue dots to put the leaves on. This is, I love all the cards in this class, but I think this is one of my favorites. Whoops, I put over the other set of leaves. And by using glue dots, I can just kind of press that down. Let's find another one. And then we'll add it up here at the top. Okay, so that is project number 3, and I love the way that opens and just shows that little bit of designer series paper. We're all ready to project number 4. So this one, I think maybe earlier I said one was my favorite.
Yes.
I take that back. This one I think is my favorite. So this one is really going to bring out your inner artist. This is a really fun way to use this intricate die cut. So let's get started. We have a card base of pale papaya, such a pretty color. Burnish it, and then we will go ahead and add our inside panel. Basic white layer. Which one's your favorite, Dee?
I like the third one.
Do you? It's hard to choose. I guess we really shouldn't have a favorite, right?
Like children.
Okay, then we also have a black layer that we're going to mat our focal image. So let's bring in our piece we're going to be doing stamping on. And the very first thing we're going to start with is this beautiful thanks sentiment. So bringing in our memento, ink this up really well. It's a really pretty font. Get inky fingers on my paper. So we'll stamp our greeting because that will help us with placement of the other stamping. Pretty good, huh?
Very good.
Okay, I'm going to pass that off to Dale so I don't make a mess. Now we are going to bring in this gorgeous die cut piece, and I think you're going to love what we're going to do here. So if you'll notice on our sample, it's really only adhered in the center. We have stamping underneath, so that color just barely peeks through the die cut. So I'll show you how we did that. Now for this one, I'm not going to worry so much about moving the ink on the ink pad because I do want color coming through. We're going to start with the big floral image. We're going to ink it up really good. And we're just going to bring it up and over where the die cut is. Pull the die cut out and stamp down. Pretty cool, huh? That's all we need polished pink for. Then we're going to bring in, even though this is a wow card, it's very, very easy to do. We are going to bring in that other floral image, ink it with Pale Papaya. We're going to kind of hover over the die cut piece again. Pull it out and stamp down. So when we bring our die cut back in, you can see that that kind of peeks through that floral image. Okay, whoop, I still need Pale Papaya. Let me get this straightened back out a little bit. Now that stamp that we used to stamp the center of our last flower, we're going to use it right here to give this little, almost like a rosebud, a little bit of color. So again, we'll kind of hover over and then just stamp down. And so that gives it a little color underneath that rosebud. And the last thing we need to stamp is our greenery, our little leaves. So we're coming back in with Pear Pizzazz like we've been using all morning. Just kind of get things lined up here. And first we'll use the image that has the 2 leaves. We're going to use that same technique where we just kind of hover over the die cut, pull it out, and stamp. So you can see my stamping is overlapping just a little bit, but that's okay. And I may be using a little bit more pressure than I did on my first one. I like the way this one's turning out. And then over this leaf, oops, I moved it. Let's try that again. Get everything lined back up. Bring that up just a little bit, kind of turn it just a little bit. That's better. Okay, and now we'll come right over here and stamp that leaf. Now this is a very artsy technique, so if it's not completely perfect, that's okay. Just having that little bit of color kind of peeking through. Sorry if you hear Oliver barking in the background. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I'm going to turn it just a tiny bit more. That looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to bring that up, put a little bit of liquid glue. If I can get my glue going. And put that in the center. I'm going to put some embellishments there, so that will cover up where I have my glue. I like the fact that that die cut piece gives some dimension. So I'm not adhering it all the way around. And now we are ready to add this to our basic black cardstock. And that mat is really going to make our sentiment pop. There's just a very small mat of black. Oops, got a little piece of glue there. So again, each of these is going to turn out a little bit different, and that's part of what makes it fun. And again, we'll just layer that on our Pale Papaya card base. Aren't those colors just so gorgeous together? I think that looks pretty good. So now one of the embellishments from the ephemera pack are some little leaves. So in each of the to-go kits or the kits here for class at our home, it's going to be a little bit different embellishment. So for this one, I've just got a very small piece, this one a little bit bigger piece. And again, I'm going to use a glue dot and add it just to the end so that I can tuck that underneath. So you've got different ephemera pieces that you can use. I think for this one, I kind of like that right about there. That's pretty. So there's a couple different kind of leaf or foliage pieces that you can use. I don't think I grabbed my Take Your Pick tool. Let me see if it's here in my basket. There's a wink of Stella. That won't work. So I'm going to use my Take Your Pick tool. And for this sample, I did choose a couple of the In Color jewels. These are some of my favorite new embellishments. And I don't think there's really any color that you could choose that you could go wrong. So what do you think, Dee? What should I use on this one?
I think they'll pile.
Do you? Okay. We'll come in and just using my Take Your Pick tool, lifting up those little embellishments and adding them to the center. And I think I did, what, 3 on my other card? And that covers that little bit of adhesive. You could even put 5 of them if you wanted to. There's 2 different sizes, and I think on Pale Papaya, I mainly just have the small one left. But I think I'll just put 3. That does look really pretty. Okay, so that finishes up card number 3. I think I will put a couple more.
I like it.
Do you?
Can you overdo embellishments?
Not really. I don't think so. I don't think you can overdo stamping, though, like somebody told us earlier. Well, we do kind of have to edit sometimes, though, don't we? Yeah, these embellishments, they are super shiny, super fun. And they're the brand new In Colors. So there is card number 4. Love it. So let me pull this sample out of the way, and I will go ahead and bring in each of the projects that we made today in our class. And remember, if you missed the deadline, I do have just a couple of extra kits. So you can let me know if you would like to claim one of those, and then you can make these projects as well. I hope you had fun stamping with us this morning. We'll be back next month with another fun class. I think we decided to do Garden Wishes in August. So that one's really fun. It has the dandelion. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you again really soon.